Blood on the desert sand glinted in the harsh August sun of 1873. As Penelope James lay motionless on the dusty trail 20 m outside of Weaverville, California, her once white dress was torn and stained, her honey blonde hair matted, with dirt and her own blood. Each shallow breath sent pain radiating through her bruised ribs as consciousness threatened to slip away again. The distant sound of hoofbeats barely registered in her fading awareness. Xavier Hayes spotted something unusual on the horizon as he guided his chestnut mare along the lonely trail back to his ranch. At first, he thought it might be discarded clothing or perhaps an animal carcass, but as he drew closer, the unmistakable form of a woman became clear. He spurred his horse forward, dust kicking up behind them. "Good Lord," he muttered, dismounting swiftly and kneeling beside the battered woman. Her face was swollen, one eye blackened, and her lips split. Xavier removed his bandana, pouring some water from his canteen to dampen it, before gently wiping blood from her face. "Madam, can you hear me?" Penelope stirred slightly, her eyelids fluttering. Through blurred vision, she made out the silhouette of a man against the bright sky, broad-shouldered with a cowboy hat casting shadows across his features. Instinctively, she tried to crawl away, a whimper escaping her lips. "Easy, now," Xavier said softly, holding his hands up. "I'm not going to hurt you. You need help." Her throat was parched, making speech difficult. "Please," she managed the single word emerging as a hoarse whisper. Xavier nodded, understanding her desperation. With gentle movements, he slipped one arm beneath her shoulders and the other under her knees, lifting her as carefully as possible. Even so, she winced, pain etched across her features. "I've got a ranch about 5 miles from here. My housekeeper can tend to your wounds," he explained, setting her atop his horse before mounting behind her. He wrapped one arm securely around her waist, holding the residential with his other hand. "Just lean back against me. I'll get you someplace safe." Penelope had no choice but to trust this stranger. Consciousness ebbed and flowed as they rode, her body occasionally going limp against his chest. Xavier maintained a steady pace, not wanting to jostle her injuries further, all the while wondering who had left this woman for dead and why. Pine Creek Ranch came into view as the sun began its descent behind the western mountains. It wasn't the largest spread in the territory, but Xavier had worked hard to build something respectable since arriving in California 4 years earlier. A modest 2-story house stood alongside a barn and corral with several outbuildings dotting the property. "Mrs. Finch," Xavier called as he carefully dismounted, still supporting the injured woman. "Mrs. Finch, come quickly." The door swung open, revealing a stout woman in her 50s with gray straw hair pulled into a tight bun. Her eyes widened at the sight before her. "Merciful heavens! What happened?" she exclaimed, rushing forward to help. "Found her beaten on the trail to town," Xavier explained, carrying Penelope through the doorway. "She needs tending to and quick. Take her to the spare bedroom," Mrs. Finch directed, already rolling up her sleeves. "I'll fetch water and bandages." The spare room was simply furnished, but clean, with an iron-framed bed covered by a patchwork quilt. Xavier laid Penelope down gently, noting how her breathing seemed labored. "Don't you worry, miss," Mrs. Finch said, returning with supplies. "We'll have you mended in no time." She turned to Xavier with a stern expression. "Out with you now. This isn't proper work for a man's eyes." Xavier nodded, stepping out, but lingering in the hallway. "I'll ride for Doc Wilson if you think she needs him." "Let me see to her first," Mrs. Finch replied, closing the door firmly. Over the next hour, Mrs. Finch cleaned Penelope's wounds, wrapped her ribs, and helped her into a clean nightgown that had belonged to Xavier's late mother. Through it all, Penelope drifted between consciousness and oblivion, occasionally murmuring incoherently or flinching away from phantom attackers. "She's had a terrible beating," Mrs. Finch reported when she finally emerged from the room. 3 cracked ribs by my reckoning, that eyes swollen shut, and she's covered in bruises. Some defensive wounds on her hands, too. She fought back against whoever did this. Davier's jaw tightened, anger rising at the thought of someone attacking a woman so brutally. Will she be all right? With time and rest, I believe so. No signs of Mrs. Finch hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Further violations, thank the Lord. But she's feverish now. We should fetch the doctor if it doesn't break by morning. Did she say anything? Her name, or who did this, Mrs. Finch? Shook her head. Only fragments. Something about a man named Salas and a lockbox. Nothing that makes much sense. Davian nodded grimly. I'll sit with her. Tonight. You get some rest, Mrs. Finch. That wouldn't be proper, Mr. Hayes, she protested. I'll sit in the chair by the door, he assured her. Just to be on hand if she wakes frightened or needs anything. You've done enough for today. Reluctantly, Mrs. Finch agreed, leaving Xavier with instructions to call her at the first sign of trouble. The night passed slowly. Xavier dozed intermittently in the uncomfortable wooden chair, waking at every sound from the bed. Near dawn, Penelope began thrashing, caught in the grip of a nightmare. No, please. I don't have it, she cried out, her voice breaking. Xavier moved to her bedside, hesitating before gently touching her shoulder. Miss, you're safe now. No one's going to hurt you here. Her eyes flew open, wild with fear, before gradually focusing on his face. Recognition flickered not of him personally, but of the man who had rescued her. Water, she whispered. Xavier helped her sit up slightly, supporting her back as she sipped from the glass he held to her lips. Thank you, she managed, her voice stronger than the previous day. Where am I? Pine Creek Ranch, my place. Im Chevalier. Hayes. He set the glass aside. Can you tell me your name? She hesitated, fear crossing her features before she seemed to decide something. Penelope. Penelope James. Miss James, do you remember what happened to you? Who did this? Pain shadowed her eyes, not just physical. I can't. I shouldn't. Say, was it this Salas you mentioned? Surprise registered on her face, followed quickly by alarm. You know Salas? No, Madam. You called his name in. Your sleep. Penelope sank back against the pillows, seemingly relieved, yet still wary. I can't involve anyone else. In my troubles. You've been kind, but once I'm able, I should go. Xavier Fronat. You're welcome to stay as long as needed. Whatever trouble you're in, perhaps I can help. She shook her head, emphatically, wincing at the pain the movement caused. No, they're dangerous men. They'll kill anyone who interferes. Xavier raised an eyebrow. So there's more than just Salas's. Penelope closed her eyes, realizing she'd revealed more than intended. Please, Mr. Hayes, the less you know, the safer you'll be. Xavier considered pressing further, but recognized the fear in her voice. All right, but you're staying put until you're healed. At least I won't have you wandering off to get yourself killed after I went to the trouble of finding you. A ghost of a smile touched Penelope's lips at his gruff concern. You're stubborn, Mr. Hayes. So I've been told, he replied with a slight grin. Rest now. Mrs. Finch will bring you some broth when you wake. The next few days established a rhythm. Penelope slept much of the time, her body working to heal the abuse it had suffered. When awake, she accepted Mrs. Finch's motherly care and Xavier's occasional visits with increasing comfort, though she remained guarded about her past. On the 4th day, Xavier brought her a book from his modest library, a collection of Tennyson's poems. Thought you might be getting bored? He explained, setting it on her bedside table. Not much for reading myself, but my mother loved this one. That's very thoughtful, Penelope said, genuinely touched by the gesture. She reached for the book, her fingers brushing against his. For a moment, neither moved. The simple contact somehow significant. Xavier cleared his throat, pulling his hand away. I'll be riding into town tomorrow. Is there anything you need? She hesitated. Mr. Hayes, you've done far too much already. Nonsense. And call Me, Xavier, please. Mr. Hayes makes me feel like my father. Penelope smiled, the expression transforming her face despite the fading bruises. Xavier, then, and I'm Penelope. He nodded, returning her smile. Penelope, it suits you. The following morning, Xavier prepared for his trip to Weaverville. Typically, he visited town only when necessary, preferring the solitude of his ranch to the bustle of the growing mining settlement. Keep a close eye on her, Mrs. Finch, he instructed as he mounted his horse. I should be back before sundown. She'll be fine, the housekeeper assured him. That girl's tougher than she looks. Xavier tipped his hat and set off, his mind filled with questions about his mysterious guest. In town, he attended to his usual business supplies at the general store, mail at the post office, a quick visit to the bank. As he was leaving the latter, a poster tacked to the community board caught his eye, a crude drawing of a woman with the words wanted for theft and murder printed below. Though the illustration was poor, there was something familiar in the face. A chill ran through him as he read the text beneath. Penelope E. James wanted for the theft of $5,000 and the murder of Salas Blackwell in Sacramento. Reward offered for information or capture. Xavier stared at the poster, his mind racing. This couldn't be the same Penelope. The woman recovering in his home seemed incapable of murder. Yet the name matched, and she had mentioned Alice. The date on the poster was just 1 week prior. He yanked the notice from the board, folding it and tucking it into his pocket. On impulse, he stepped into the sheriff's office. Sheriff Doyle glanced up from his desk. Hayes, don't often see you twice in a month. Just wondering if you've had reports of any trouble lately, Xavier said casually. Bandits or such on the roads, Doyle shrugged. Nothing unusual. Why? You encounter something? No, just being cautious. Xavier azitata. Heard any news from Sacramento recently? Nothing specific, though. There was some banker got himself killed last week. Messy business from what I heard. The sheriff eyed him suspiciously. What's your interest? No interest, just making conversation. Xavier moved toward the door. Good day, Sheriff. On the ride home, Xavier wrestled with his discovery. The woman he'd rescued was either a dangerous criminal or herself a victim of some injustice. His instincts told him the latter, but he couldn't ignore the wanted poster. When he arrived at the ranch, he was surprised to find Penelope sitting on the porch wrapped in a quilt despite the warm afternoon. Color had returned to her cheeks, and she'd managed to arrange her hair neatly with Mrs. Finch's help. You're looking better, he observed, tying his horse to the rail. Fresh air helps, she replied. Mrs. Finch thought I should start rebuilding my strength. Xavier nodded, deciding directness was the only approach. He pulled the wanted poster from his pocket, unfolding it and holding it up. Care to explain this? The color drained from Penelope's face. She gripped the arms of the chair, looking as though she might bolt despite her injuries. Where did you get that? Town notice board? He answered, sitting in the chair beside her. Now I'm inclined to believe there's more to this story, considering the state I found you in, but I need the truth, Penelope. She stared at her hands for a long moment, then took a deep breath. I didn't kill Silas Blackwell, but I'm accused of it and of stealing money that was already stolen. Start at the beginning, Xavier urged gently. I was a teller at Blackwell's bank in Sacramento, she began, her voice steady despite her obvious distress. 6 months ago, I noticed discrepancies in certain accounts, money moving in ways that didn't make sense. When I investigated further, I realized Salas was embezzling from his depositors. And you confronted him, Xavier guessed. Penelope nodded foolishly. I thought he would make it, right if exposed. Instead, he threatened me. Said no one would believe a woman over him, and that his associates would ensure I never spoke of it again. She paused, pulling the quilt tighter around her shoulders. I should have left then, but I couldn't. Just watch him steal from people who trusted him. So I gathered evidence, ledgers, notes, everything proving what he was doing. I was going to take it to the authorities, but he found out. Yes, last week he caught me copying ledger entries. There was a struggle. He tried to. Her voice faltered. He attacked me, but I managed to escape with the evidence. I was planning to take it to the federal marshal in Sacramento the next morning. But you never made it, Xavier prompted. When she fell silent, I returned to my boarding house to find it ransacked. While I was hiding, too, men arrived, Salas and his partner Reed Tucker. They were searching for the documents. When they couldn't find them, Salas became enraged. Tucker tried to calm him. They argued and then she shuddered. Tucker shot him right there in my room. Xavier watched her carefully, seeing no deception in her eyes, and they framed you for it. Tucker took the money. Salas had been carrying the embezzled funds and the gun. Then he saw me hiding. He said I was the perfect solution to his problems. With me blamed for Salas's murder and the missing money, no one would look further. Her voice hardened. He and his men brought me out here to kill me where no one would find the body, but they argued about whether to use me first. Xavier's hands clenched into fists at the implication. During the argument, I managed to break free. One of them caught me, beat me badly, but I fought back. Something distracted them. A noise in the distance, I think, and they left me for dead rather than finishing the job. She met his gaze directly. That's when you found me. And the evidence you collected, the documents that could clear your name, hidden, she said simply, somewhere they couldn't find. Xavier considered her story. It explained her injuries, her fear, and her reluctance to involve others. These men, Tucker and his associates, they'll be looking for you. Yes, and they're connected. Wealthy men with influence. She looked away. I put you in danger just by being here. I can handle myself, Xavier assured her. He stood, decision made. You'll stay until you're fully recovered. Then we'll figure out how to clear your name. You believe me? Penelope asked, surprise evident in her voice. I'm a decent judge of character, Penelope. You're no murderer. Relief washed over her features, and impulsively she reached for his hand, squeezing it gratefully. Thank you. The moment stretched between them, a connection forming that neither had anticipated. Finally, Xavier gently pulled away. You should rest. We can talk more tomorrow. Over the next week, Penelope's strength gradually returned. Xavier found himself seeking her company, with increasing frequency, bringing her books or simply sitting with her on the porch in the evenings. Her sharp mind and quiet determination impressed him, as did her resilience in the face of her ordeal. One evening, as they watched the sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson, Penelope broached the subject that had been unspoken between them. I need to return to Sacramento, she said softly. The evidence I hid, it's the only way to clear my name. Xavier frowned, turning to face her. You're not fully healed yet. Healed enough? She countered. And every day I stay puts you at greater risk. You planning to just walk into Sacramento with a price on your head? He challenged. I have a friend there, a woman I trust. She can help me retrieve the documents. Xavier was silent for a long moment. Were you thinking of leaving? Tomorrow, if possible, I could take the stage from Weaverville. Alone. He shook his head firmly. Not happening, Penelope. If you're determined to go, I'm coming with you. She began to protest, but he raised a hand to stop her. This isn't negotiable. You need someone watching your back, and I'm offering your ranch. Liam can manage things for a week, Xavier said, referring to his ranch hand. Mrs. Finch will keep him in line. Penelope studied his face, seeing the determination there. Why would you risk yourself for me? You barely know me. Xavier considered the question seriously. Maybe because I've spent 4 years out here keeping to myself, not getting involved, and then you quite literally landed in my path. He smiled slightly. Or maybe I just have a strong dislike for men who beat women and leave them for dead. The real answer, that in their short acquaintance, she had awakened something in him. He thought long buried remained unspoken. It will be dangerous, she warned. Most worthwhile things are, he replied. Simply. The following morning they set out for Weaverville to catch the afternoon stage. Xavier had explained their absence to Mrs. Finch and Liam as a necessary trip to Sacramento on business, without elaborating on the nature of that business. In town, Xavier purchased tickets while Penelope waited at a small cafe. A shawl draped over her head to obscure her features. Her heart raced each time. The door opened, fearing discovery, but their luck held. The stage journey would take 2 days with an overnight stop in Reading. As they boarded, Xavier noticed Penelope's tension. She sat close to him, her shoulders rigid, eyes constantly scanning their fellow passengers, an elderly couple, a salesman, and a young miner heading to the city. Try to relax, Xavier murmured. You look nervous, which draws attention. She nodded, making a visible effort to loosen her posture. I haven't been around people since. I know, he said quietly, but you're not alone now. The journey passed without incident, though neither slept much during the night at the roadhouse in Reading. By the time they reached Sacramento the following evening, both were exhausted but alert. We should find rooms for the night, Xavier suggested as they disembarked at the busy station. Your friend can wait until morning, Penelope shook her head. Clara works nights at the hospital. This is the best time to find her, and I don't want to risk staying at a hotel where I might be recognized. They hired a carriage to take them to Sacramento General Hospital, where Penelope asked for Clara Bennett, identify herself as a cousin. When the nurse appeared, a slender woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. Her shock at seeing Penelope was quickly masked by professional composure. This way, she directed, leading them to a small room used by the staff for breaks. Once the door closed, she embraced Penelope tightly. My God, Penny, everyone thinks you're either dead or on the run. I nearly was dead, Penelope replied grimly, then quickly introduced Xavier and explained their situation. Clara listened intently, her expression growing darker. I knew something was wrong when they claimed you killed Salazes. You couldn't hurt a fly. She glanced at Chevalier, and you've been protecting her, just offering a helping hand, he replied modestly. Clara assessed him with a nurse's perceptive eye. Well, she's lucky you found her. She turned back to Penelope. What do you need from me? A place to stay tonight and help retrieving something I hid. My apartment is small, but you're both welcome, Clara offered. As for the hiding place, where is it? Penelope hesitated. The cathedral. In the confessional, Xavier raised an eyebrow. You hid stolen bank records in a church. Not stolen, copied, Penelope corrected. And it seemed the safest place. No one would think to look there, and I knew the priest's schedule. I tucked the packet behind a loose panel in the third confessional. It should still be there. Clara nodded. The cathedral opens at dawn for morning mass. We can go then. They spent a restless night in Clara's small apartment. Chevalier, insisting on taking the floor while the women shared the bed. Before dawn, they set out for the cathedral, moving through streets just beginning to stir with early workers. The massive doors of the cathedral were already open when they arrived. A few parishioners scattered in the pews for morning prayers. Penelope led them toward the confessional booths along the sidewall, her steps faltering as they approached. What is it? Xavier whispered, noticing her hesitation. There's someone in there, she murmured, nodding toward a man. Exiting the middle confessional, Xavier's hand moved instinctively to the gun concealed beneath his coat. Do you recognize him? Penelope squinted, then relaxed slightly. No, just a worshiper, I think. They waited until the man left the cathedral before approaching the confessionals. Penelope slipped into the third booth, feeling along the wooden panel at knee level. After a moment, her fingers found the loose section and she pried it open. Reaching into the dark space behind her face fell. It's gone. Xavier crowded into the small space beside her, running his own fingers along the hiding spot. Are you sure this is the right place? Positive, she insisted. Someone found it. A shadow fell across the confessional entrance. Looking for this Miss James, they turned to find a man in his 50s, dressed in the dark suit of a banker or businessman holding a leather portfolio. Two younger men flanked him, their stances suggesting they weren't there to pray. Tucker, Penelope breathed, shrinking back against Xavier. Read? Tucker smiled coldly. You're more resilient than I gave you credit for. My associates assured me you wouldn't survive your lesson. Xavier moved slightly, positioning himself between Penelope and the men. You're the ones who beat her and left her to die. And you must be the good Samaritan, Tucker observed. Unfortunate for you. How did you find the documents? Penelope demanded. Tucker chuckled. You think we wouldn't watch the places? Meaningful to you? I had men observe the cathedral for days after your disappearance. Eventually, one noticed this loose panel. He tapped the portfolio. Imagine my surprise at finding such detailed evidence of poor Salaz's misdeeds and my own. There are copies, Penelope bluffed. I sent them to the federal marshal. Valiant attempt, my dear, but if that were true, I'd be in custody already. Tucker gestured to his men. Now, I think it's time we conclude our unfinished business, both of you. Xavier's hand moved in a blur, drawing his revolver and aiming it steadily at Tucker's chest. I don't think so. Tucker's smile never wavered. In a house of God, with witnesses all around, I think not, Cowboy. Besides, my men are armed as well, as you've surely noticed. The tension stretched taut between them, other parishioners beginning to notice the confrontation. I suggest, Tucker continued smoothly, that we all take a walk to someplace more private to resolve this matter. Xavier recognized the trap, but saw few alternatives. If they refused, Tucker would simply wait and have his men follow when they left. Fighting in the cathedral would endanger innocent lives. Before he could respond, Clara's voice rang out from behind Tucker. Is there a problem here? Gentlemen, Tucker turned, momentarily distracted. In that instant, Xavier seized the opportunity, lunging forward to grab the portfolio from Tucker's hand, while simultaneously pushing Penelope toward Clara. Run, he shouted, shoving Tucker hard enough to send him stumbling into his men. Chaos erupted. Tucker's men reached for their weapons. As Xavier fired a shot into the ceiling, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Screams and shouts filled the cathedral as worshippers scrambled for cover. Xavier backed away, keeping his gun trained on Tucker and his men. While Penelope and Clara fled toward the side exit, one of Tucker's men fired, the bullet splintering the wooden confessional inches from Xavier's head. Returning fire, Xavier caught the man in the shoulder, spinning him to the ground. The second attacker hesitated, just long enough for Xavier to make a break for the exit. Portfolio clutched tightly under his arm. Outside, he found Penelope and Clara waiting anxiously. We need to move now, he urged, grabbing Penelope's hand and pulling her into a run. They sprinted through side streets, avoiding the main thoroughfares where they might be easily spotted. Behind them, they could hear shouts and occasional gunfire as Tucker's men pursued. The sheriff's office, Penelope gasped as they ran. It's our only chance. Too far, Clara countered. The newspaper office is closer. My cousin works there. He'll help us. They changed direction, weaving through alleyways toward the Sacramento Gazette building. When they burst through the door, startling the few reporters present at that early hour, Clara immediately called for her cousin. James Bennett, a wiry man with ink-stained fingers, emerged from a back office. Clara, what? In blazes no time, she interrupted. These people need protection and a platform. It's about the Blackwell murder. James' journalistic instincts, visibly sharpened. The bank murder. You know something about it. Xavier thrusts the portfolio forward. We know everything about it. And we've got proof that the real killer is Reed Tucker, who's currently trying to silence us permanently. Understanding dawned on James's face as he looked at Penelope. You're the woman they're hunting, the teller. Yes, she admitted, but I didn't kill anyone. Those papers proved Tucker and Blackwell were embezzling together. When I discovered it, Blackwell tried to silence me. Tucker killed him to take over the operation and frame me for it. James flipped through the documents quickly, whistling at what he saw. This is dynamite. Names, dates, amounts all here. He looked up. You realize Tucker has half the city council in his pocket, including the sheriff. Then we need federal authorities, Xavier said grimly. and we need to stay alive long enough to reach them. A commotion outside drew their attention to the window. Tucker and 4 men, the 2 from the cathedral, plus new reinforcements, were approaching the newspaper office. Their intentions clear. Back door, James decided, grabbing the portfolio. Yves, got a printing press to protect these. Clara, take them through the alley too. Watkins at the telegraph office. He's honest. Have him wire the Federal. Marshall in San Francisco. They slipped out the rear of the building just as Tucker's men entered the front. The alley led to a narrow side street, which they followed toward the telegraph office 3 blocks away. Almost there, Clara encouraged as they rounded the final corner. A shot rang out, chipping brick from the wall beside them. Tucker stood at the end of the street, revolver raised for another shot. Inside now, Xavier pushed the women ahead of him, turning to fire back at Tucker. The telegraph operator looked up in alarm as they burst into his office. What's the meaning of federal marshal? Chevalier interrupted. We need to send a wire to San Francisco immediately. Matter of life and death. The operator hesitated, but Clara stepped forward. Please, Bill. These people have evidence of murder and massive fraud. Tucker's men are right outside. Bill Watkins peered through his window, paling at the sight of armed men approaching. All right, but make it quick. Penelope dictated a term message explaining the situation and requesting immediate federal intervention while Xavier positioned himself at the window, watching Tucker organize his men to surround the building. Message sent. Watkins confirmed. But it'll be hours before anyone from San Francisco could arrive, even if they act immediately. We need to hold out, Xavier said grimly. Is there another way out of here? Watkins shook his head. Just the front door and a window in my back room. But it's a 15 FT drop to the alley. Outside, Tucker's voice called out. You're only delaying the inevitable. Come out now, and perhaps we can reach an understanding, Xavier exchanged glances with Penelope. No chance of that. There may be another option, Clara suggested. The newspaper will have the story set for tomorrow's edition by now. Even if Tucker gets to us, the truth will still come out. Small comfort. If we're dead, Chevalier Mutarat. A new voice joined the standoff outside, authoritative commanding. Tucker, this is Sheriff Dawson. Stand down and disperse immediately. Xavier risked a look. The sheriff stood, with 4 deputies, all armed and facing Tucker's group. Sheriff, Tucker replied. Smoothly, I'm pursuing fugitives. This woman is wanted for murder, so I've heard, Dawson responded. Convenient how the only witness to Blackwell's embezzlement ended up accused of killing him. The sheriff held up a paper. Just got an interesting telegram from Judge Harmon. Seems he received some very concerning financial records this morning that implicate you in fraud, Tucker. The judge thought I should know before anyone else got hurt. Xavier turned to Penelope in confusion. James must have sent copies to the judge. She realized he said he was protecting them. Outside, Tucker's composure was cracking. This is absurd. You can't possibly believe. I believe. I'm placing you under arrest, pending investigation. Dawson interrupted. Now, drop those weapons, all of you, or my deputies will open fire. For a tense moment, it seemed Tucker might resist. Then slowly he lowered his gun, his men following suit. As the deputies moved in to disarm and restrain them, Sheriff Dawson called. Toward the telegraph office. You folks can come out now. Seems there's been some confusion about who the real criminals are in this situation. Chevalier kept his gun ready as they cautiously emerged. How do we know we can trust you? Sheriff. Dawson nodded toward the telegraph office. Judge Harmon's word carries weight with me. Always has, and these records he sent over make for interesting reading. He eyed Penelope. Miss James, I believe you've been unjustly accused. The judge would like to speak with you as soon as possible. The next 24 hours passed in a whirlwind of statements, examinations of evidence, and revelations. Judge Harmon, a stern but fair man with a reputation for incorruptibility, personally reviewed the documents Penelope had gathered. The federal marshal arrived from San Francisco by evening train, taking over The investigation. Tucker and his associates were held without bail. And by the following afternoon, the Sacramento Gazette ran a front-page story exposing the entire scheme, completely exonerating Penelope. The evidence was overwhelming ledger. Entries, correspondence between Tucker and Blackwell, even testimony from a bank clerk who had witnessed arguments between the conspirators but had been too frightened to come forward. "It's over," Penelope said with quiet wonder as she and Xavier sat in Judge Harmon's antechamber, waiting for a final meeting. "I can hardly believe it." Xavier took her hand, a gesture that had become familiar between them. "You were brave to stand up to them in the first place. Most would have looked the other way." "I couldn't," she said simply, "but I wouldn't have survived without you." The door opened, and Judge Harmon beckoned him inside. "Miss James, Mr. Hayes, thank you for your patience. I wanted to personally inform you that all charges against you have been dropped, Miss James. Furthermore, the bank's board of directors wishes to offer restitution for your ordeal." Penelope blinked in surprise. "Restitution?" "They're eager to avoid a public lawsuit," the judge explained with a hint of a smile. "They've authorized a settlement of $5,000, ironically, the same amount you were accused of stealing. They also extend an offer to return to your position, should you wish it." Xavier squeezed her hand. "That's wonderful news." But Penelope seemed hesitant. "I'm grateful, Your Honor, but I'm not sure returning to the bank is what I want anymore." Outside the courthouse, as afternoon sunlight bathed the city in golden light, Xavier and Penelope walked slowly toward Clara's apartment, where they had continued to stay. "What will you do now?" Xavier asked, suddenly aware that their shared purpose was concluding. "Will you stay in Sacramento?" Penelope stopped, turning to face him. "I don't know. There's nothing really keeping me here except Clara." She hesitated. "What about you? I suppose you'll be heading back to your ranch." Xavier nodded, an unexpected heaviness settling in his chest. "I should. Liam's capable, but there's always work waiting." He studied her face, memorizing its features, the determined set of her jaw, the intelligence in her eyes, the quiet strength that had drawn him to her from the beginning. "Penelope," he stopped, gathering his courage. "These past weeks, despite the danger, or perhaps because of it, I've come to care for you. More than I expected, more than might be wise." Her eyes widened slightly, hope dawning in their depths. "Xavier, I know it's sudden," continued quickly, "and you just regained your freedom. You deserve time to decide what you want, without pressure. But if you ever find yourself considering Weaverville," he let the thought hang unfinished. Between them, Penelope stepped closer, her hand finding his. "When I was lying on that roadside, certain I was going to die, I promised myself that if I survived, I wouldn't waste time on hesitation or fear." She took a deep breath. "I care for you too, Xavier, more than I can properly express, enough to consider a life in a small ranch outside Weaverville." He asked softly. Her answer was to rise on tiptoes and press her lips gently to his. The kiss was brief, but full of promise, and when she pulled away, they were both smiling. "I believe that's a yes," Xavier murmured. 2 weeks later, Xavier and Penelope stood on the porch of Pine Creek Ranch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in familiar glory. Mrs. Finch had welcomed Penelope with open arms, clearly approving of the change she had brought to the typically stoic rancher. "It feels like coming home," Penelope said softly, leaning against the porch railing. "Though I've never been here before. Not properly, at least." Chubby moved to stand beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. "It's different with you here. Better." She turned to him, smiling. "No regrets about bringing a city girl with a talent for finding trouble to your peaceful ranch." "Not one," he assured her, taking her hand. "Though, I prefer if you stayed off roadside ditches from now on." Penelope laughed, the sound carrying across the peaceful ranchette. "I think I can manage that." She grew more serious, her fingers tightening around his. "Thank you, Xavier, not just for saving my life, but for believing in me when you had every reason not to." He drew her close, his arms encircling her waist. I knew from the first moment I saw you that you were worth fighting for, even half dead in the dust. There was something about you, a strength that couldn't be broken. I wasn't so certain, she admitted, but you helped me find that strength again. Their lips met as the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky. The kiss, deepening with the promise of a future neither had dared imagine when fate had thrown them together on a dusty California trail. In the years that followed, Pine Creek Ranch prospered. Under their joint care, Penelope's financial acumen complemented Xavier's practical ranching knowledge, allowing them to expand their operations and eventually build a larger home to accommodate their growing family. The settlement money from the bank provided capital for improvements, and within 5 years, Pine Creek was known as one of the most successful operations in the territory. They married 6 months after returning to Weaverville, a simple ceremony with Mrs. Finch, Liam, Clara, and Judge Harmon as witnesses. Their first child, a son they named William, arrived a year later, followed by twin daughters, Emma and Grace, 2 years after that. Penelope never returned to banking, but she kept the books for the ranch and occasionally advised other local businesses. Her experience with Tucker and Blackwell had given her a keen eye for dishonesty, making her a valued consultant when questions of financial impropriety arose. Tucker and his associates received long prison sentences for fraud, embezzlement, and murder. Occasionally, news would reach Weaverville about appeals or parole hearings, but Tucker died in prison 8 years into his sentence, never again posing a threat to the life Penelope and Xavier had built. On their 10th anniversary, as they sat on the same porch where they had first acknowledged their feelings, Xavier presented Penelope with a leather-bound journal. "What's this?" she asked, running her fingers over the soft cover. "Our story," he replied. "I had Clara help me gather the newspaper accounts, court records, even some of your notes. I thought our children should know someday not just how we met, but what you overcame." Tears welled in Penelope's eyes as she leafed through the pages. From beaten and abandoned on a roadside to this, she murmured, gesturing to their home, their land, the distant sound of their children playing. "It seems impossible." Xavier took her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Not impossible, just unlikely, like most good things in life." As twilight settled over Pine Creek Ranch, they remained on the porch, hands entwined, watching the first stars appear. From tragedy had come triumph. From violence, peace. From a chance encounter, on a lonely trail, a love that had not only healed wounds, but built something enduring and beautiful on the foundation of shared courage and trust. In the soft, gathering darkness, Penelope leaned her head against Xavier's shoulder, content in the knowledge that the road that had once nearly claimed her life had ultimately led her home.